But many top AI companies, including OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, are treating building AGI as an entirely serious goal, and a goal that many people inside those companies think they might reach in 10 or 20 years, and some believe could be as close as 1 to 3 years away. More to the point, many of these same people believe that if they succeed in building computers that are as smart as humans, or perhaps far smarter than humans, that technology will be, at a minimum, extraordinarily disruptive, and at a maximum could lead to literal human extinction.
The advent of AGI could have some incredible benefits, but also poses some unprecedented risks. This Senate Judiciary hearing provides a chilling glimpse into the current state of AI safety, featuring some testimony from former insiders at leading AI companies like OpenAI, Google, and Meta. And these whistleblowers reveal a concerning disconnect between public perception and the reality within these organizations. Expose their security practices, the prioritization of profit over safety, and a race to deploy potentially dangerous technology before the adequate safeguards are in place. So in this video, you'll actually see a few of the policies being proposed that will likely impact how AI development changes over the next coming years, and likely how we begin to use this technology in more advanced ways.
We're here today to hear from you because every one of the witnesses that we have today are experts who were involved in developing AI on behalf of Meta, Google, OpenAI, and you saw firsthand how those companies dealt with safety issues. The incentives for a race to the bottom are overwhelming. And companies, even as we speak, are cutting corners and pulling back on efforts to make sure that AI systems do not cause the kinds of harm that even Sam Altman thought were possible. We're already seeing the consequences. Artificial general intelligence, or AGI, which I know our witnesses are going to address today, provides even more frightening prospects for harm. The idea that AGI might, in 10 or 20 years, be smarter, or at least as smart as human beings, is no longer that far out in the future. It's very far from science fiction. It's here and now. 1 to 3 years has been the latest prediction, in fact, before this committee. And we know that artificial intelligence that's as smart as human beings is also capable of deceiving us, manipulating us, and concealing facts from us.
So now this is where we actually get into some of these statements from the insiders at these top tech companies. There's a number of different people there. For number one, we have Helen Tona, someone who used to work at OpenAI on the board. We also have William Saunders, a former member of technical staff at OpenAI. We have Margaret Mitchell, a former staff research scientist at Google AI, and David Even Harris, a senior policy advisor for the California Initiative for Technology and Democracy. And he used to work at Meta, so you're going to hear different statements from all of these individuals about how they think the AI industry is changing, but the ones from those who work to OpenAI are particularly fascinating.
The title of this hearing is Oversight of AI Insiders' Perspectives. And the biggest disconnect that I see between AI insider perspectives and public perceptions of AI companies is when it comes to the idea of artificial general intelligence, or AGI. This term, AGI, isn't well defined, but it's generally used to mean AI systems that are roughly as smart or capable as a human. In public and policy conversations, talk of human-level AI is often treated as either science fiction or marketing hype. But many top AI companies, including OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, are treating building AGI as an entirely serious goal, and a goal that many people inside those companies think they might reach in 10 or 20 years, and some believe could be as close as 1 to 3 years away. More to the point, many of these same people believe that if they succeed in building computers that are as smart as humans, or perhaps far smarter than humans, that technology will be, at a minimum, extraordinarily disruptive, and at a maximum could lead to literal human extinction. The companies in question often say that it's too early for any regulation because the science of how AI works and how to make it safe is too nascent. I'd like to restate that in different words. They're saying, we don't have good science of how these systems work or how to tell when they'll be smarter than us. We don't have good science for how to make sure they won't cause massive harm. But don't worry, the main factors driving our decisions are profit incentives and unrelenting market pressure to move faster than our competitors. So we promise we're being extra, extra safe. Whatever these companies say about it being too early for any regulation, the reality is that billions of dollars are being poured into building and deploying increasingly advanced AI systems, and these systems are affecting hundreds of millions of people's lives, even in the absence of scientific consensus about how they work or what will be built next. So I would argue that a wait-and-see approach to policy is not an option. I want to be clear. I don't know how long we have to prepare for smarter than human AI, and I don't know how hard it will be to control it and ensure that it's safe. As I'm sure the committee has heard 1,000 times, AI doesn't just bring risks. It also has the potential to raise living standards, help solve global challenges, and empower people around the world. If the story were simply that this technology is bad and dangerous, then our job would be much simpler. The challenge we face is figuring out how to proactively make good policy despite immense uncertainty and expert disagreement about how quickly AI will progress and what dangers will arise along the way.
So this is where we get Helen Toner's actual proposal, in which she gives an outline for certain policies, which she thinks that will actually help the AI industry in terms of regulation, but most importantly, being able to regulate without slowing down. And I think that's one of the most important things, is the AI industry is something that moves rapidly, more rapidly than you could even think.
The good news is that there are light touch, adaptive policy measures we can adopt today that can both be helpful if we do see powerful AI systems soon, and also be helpful with many other AI policy issues that I'm sure we'll be discussing today. I want to briefly highlight 6 policy building blocks that I describe in more detail in my written testimony. First, we should be implementing transparency requirements for developers of high-stakes AI systems. We should be making major research investments in how to measure and evaluate AI, as well as how to make it safe. We should be supporting the development of a rigorous third-party audit ecosystem, bolstering whistleblower protections for employees of AI companies, increasing technical expertise in government, and clarifying how liability for AI harms should be allocated. These measures are really basic first steps that would in no way impede further innovation in AI. This kind of policy is about laying some minimal, common sense groundwork to help us get a handle on AI harms we're already seeing, and also set us up to identify and respond to new developments in AI over time. This is not a technology we can manage with any single piece of legislation, but we're long overdue to implement some of these basic building blocks as a starting point.
Next, we'll hear from William Saunders, who is a former employee at OpenAI that worked with Jan. Like, that was actually on the super alignment team. This testimony is rather surprising as he discusses the recent O1 model and its capabilities.
For 3 years, I worked as a member of technical staff at OpenAI. Companies like OpenAI are working towards building artificial general intelligence, AGI. They are raising billions of dollars towards this goal. OpenAI's charter defines AGI as highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. This means AI systems that could act on their own over long periods of time and do most jobs that humans can do. AI companies are making rapid progress towards building AGI. A few days before this hearing, OpenAI announced a new system, GPT-O1, that passed significant milestones, including one that was personally significant for me. When I was in high school, I spent years training for a prestigious international computer science competition. OpenAI's new system leaps from failing to qualify to winning a gold medal, doing better than me in an area relevant to my own job. There are still significant gaps to close, but I believe it is plausible that an AGI system could be built in as little as 3 years. AGI would cause significant changes to society, including radical changes to the economy and employment. AGI could also cause catastrophic harm via systems autonomously conducting cyber attacks or assisting in the creation of novel biological weapons. OpenAI's new AI system is the first system to show steps towards biological weapons risk, as it is capable of helping experts in planning to reproduce a known biological threat. Without rigorous testing, developers might miss this kind of dangerous capability. While OpenAI has pioneered aspects of this testing, they've also repeatedly prioritized speed of deployment over rigor. I believe there is a real risk they will miss important, dangerous capabilities in future AI systems. AGI will also be a valuable target for theft. including by foreign adversaries of the United States. While OpenAI publicly claims to take security seriously, their internal security was not prioritized. When I was at OpenAI, there were long periods of time where there were vulnerabilities that would have allowed me or hundreds of other employees at the company to bypass access controls and steal the company's most advanced AI systems, including GPT-4. No one knows how to ensure that AGI systems will be safe and controlled. Current AI systems are trained by human supervisors, giving them a reward when they appear to be doing the right thing. We will need new approaches when handling systems that can find novel ways to manipulate their supervisors or hide misbehavior until deployed. The superalignment team at OpenAI was tasked with developing these approaches, but ultimately we had to figure out as we went along, a terrifying prospect when catastrophic harm is possible. Today, that team no longer exists. Its leaders and many key researchers resigned after struggling to get the resources they needed to be successful. OpenAI will say that they are improving. I and other employees who resigned doubt they will be ready in time. This is true not just with OpenAI. The incentives to prioritize rapid deployment apply to the entire industry. This is why a policy response is needed. My fellow witnesses and I may have different specific concerns with the AI industry, but I believe we can find common ground in addressing them. If you want insiders to communicate about problems within AI companies, you need to make such communication safe and easy. That means a clear point of contact and legal protections for whistleblowing employees. Regulation must also prioritize requirements for third-party testing, both before and after deployment. Results from these tests must be shared. Creating an independent oversight organization and mandated transparency requirements, as in Senator Blumenthal and Senator Hawley's proposed framework, would be important steps towards these goals. I resigned from OpenAI because I lost faith that by themselves they will make responsible decisions about AGI. If any organization builds technology that imposes significant risks on everyone, the public must be involved in deciding how to avoid or minimize those risks. That was true before AI, it needs to be true today with AI. Thank you for your work on these issues, and I look forward to your questions.
So that was pretty crazy. I mean, it just goes to show the pace of AI development, and even whilst working at OpenAI, some of the things that happen can truly even surprise you. Next, we do get some information from Helen Tona about the deployment of GP4 and how internally they actually managed to deploy this system early against its, standard safety procedure.
Situations like a process known as the Deployment Safety Board, which was set up internally. Great idea for something to try and coordinate safety between OpenAI and Microsoft when using OpenAI products. It's now been reported publicly that in the early days of that process, Microsoft, they're in the midst of planning a very big, very important launch, the launch of GPT-4. And Microsoft went ahead and launched GPT-4 to tens of thousands of users in India without getting approval from that Deployment Safety Board. Another example would be that there's been, since I stepped off the board, there's been concerns raised from inside the company that in the lead up to the launch of their 4.0 model, which was the voice assistant that had very, very exciting launch videos, was launched the day before a Google event that OpenAI knew might upstage them. And there's been concerns raised from inside the company about their inability to fully carry through the kinds of safety commitments that the company had made in advance of that. So there's additional examples, but I think that those two illustrate the core point.
And next, this is where we get into some really super interesting stuff, because they actually talk about some of the things that have been going on at OpenAI with Sam Altman. As many of you guys know, he was actually in the same building last year testifying about AI safety and why, of course, you need rules and regulations. So now that, of course, like a year later, people from the board are stepping down and saying, look, things aren't exactly going as to plan. I mean, it really is interesting to see how everything has evolved from the moment before. So it will be interesting to see exactly how they discuss these issues in relation to that.
Left the OpenAI board, one of the reasons that you did so is you felt you couldn't do your job properly, meaning you couldn't effectively oversee Mr. Altman and some of the safety decisions that he was making. You had said this year that, I'm just going to quote you, that Mr. Altman gave inaccurate information about the small number of formal safety processes that the company did have in place. That is, that he gave incorrect information to the board. To the extent you're able, can you just elaborate on this? I'm interested in what's actually being done for safety inside this company, in no small part because of what he told us when he sat where you're sitting.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I'm happy to elaborate to the extent that I can without breaching any confidentiality obligations. I believe that, when the company has safety processes, they announce them loudly and proudly. So I believe that you and your staff would be aware of the processes they have in place. At the time, one that I was thinking of, which was one of the first formal processes that I'm aware of, was this deployment safety board that I just discussed, and this breach by Microsoft that took place in the early days there. Since then, they have introduced a preparedness framework, which I think is, I want to commend many of these companies for taking some good steps. I think the idea behind the preparedness framework is good. I think to the extent they execute on it, that's great. But there have been concerns raised about, how well they're able to comply with it. It's been publicly reported that the, really respected expert they brought in to run that team has since been reassigned from that role. Which, I worry what that means for the influence that team is able to exert on the rest of the company. And I think that is illustrative as well of a larger dynamic that I'm sure all of the witnesses here today have observed, which is there are really great people inside all of these companies trying to do really great things. And the challenge is that if everything is up to the companies themselves and to the leadership teams who are needing to make trade-offs around getting products out, making profits, attracting new investors, those teams may not get the resourcing, the time, the influence, the ability to actually shape what happens that they need. So I think many of the dynamics that I witnessed echo very much what I'm hearing from my fellow witnesses.
That's very helpful.
This is where we get into a direct quote from Sam Memon previous Lie when he was here, and it actually talks about what he said about the specific guidelines that OpenAI is doing. Of course, I do know about OpenAI's preparedness framework and how they actually utilize this to ensure that all models that are deployed are actually ones that are safe.
Let me just ask you this. Let me just put a finer point on it, because Mr. Altman, as I said, testified to us on this connection this past year. Here's part of what he said. We make, meaning OpenAI, significant efforts to ensure that safety is built into our systems at all levels. And then he went on to say, and I'm still quoting him, before releasing any new system, OpenAI conducts extensive testing, engages external experts for detailed reviews and independent audits, improves the model's behavior, and implements robust safety and monitoring systems. In your experience, is that accurate?
I believe it is possible to characterize the company's activities accurately that way, yes. The question is how much is enough, who is making those decisions, and what incentives are driving those decisions. So in practice, if you make a commitment, you have to write that commitment down in some words, and then when you go to implement it, there's going to be a lot of detailed decisions you have to make about what information is shared with whom at what time, who is brought into the right room to make a certain decision. Is your safety team, whatever kind of safety team it might be, are they brought in from the very beginning to help with conception of the product, really think from the start about what implications this might have, or are they handed something a couple of weeks before a launch deadline and told, okay, make this as good as you can do? Here, I'm not trying to refer to any specific incidents at OpenAI. I'm really referring to, again, examples that I've heard reported publicly, heard from across the industry, that there are good efforts, and I worry that we should not, that if we rely on the companies to make all of those trade-offs, all of those detailed decisions about how those commitments are implemented, that they're just unable to fully account for the interests of a broad public. And I think, you hear this as well from people, I've heard this from people in multiple companies, sentiment along the lines of, please help us slow down. Please give us guardrails that we can point to that are external, that help us not only be subject to these market pressures.
This is one of the most fascinating parts of this talk, because he actually asks, are OpenAI essentially doing enough? And Helen Tona gives a response that is, it depends on whether or not you think AI is telling the truth, because OpenAI has predicted certain things about their future models, these capabilities that are going to be pretty incredible if it is true. And apparently, if these predictions are correct, then we might not be doing enough.
General, is your impression now, is OpenAI doing enough in terms of its safety procedures and protocols to adequately vet its own products and to protect the public?
I think it depends entirely on how rapidly their research progresses. If their most aggressive predictions of how quickly their systems will get more advanced are correct, then I have serious concerns. If their most aggressive predictions may well be wrong, in which case I'm somewhat less concerned.
So this is where we get into the next section of the talk. And this one is a little bit different because this is where we get David Even Harris speaking about the kinds of policies that, potentially going to be implemented